Welcome to the Friday Reporter, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes with the journalists and content creators who shape the news. I'm Lisa Camooso Miller, and each week I sit down with the voices driving the headlines to hear their stories, insights, and perspectives. From breaking news to behind-the-scenes moments, this is the conversation you won't get anywhere else. So grab your coffee and join me for another episode of the Friday Reporter. Well, hello, and thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the Friday Reporter podcast. We're leaning into April, busy time here in Washington, and I know no busier man in Washington, D.C. than today's guest. If you are a communicator who is in any way caring about energy, you need to be on Frank Maisano's list. Frank has been doing this newsletter, this note out to reporters and communicators and stakeholders for as long as I have been in Washington, which is more than just a few years. Frank, it is my pleasure to have you here today.
You know what? I'm really excited to be here, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me. We've known each other for a long time back in the day. And I want to say back in the day, but it's not back in the day for you as much because I've been here so longer. So I'm really feeling old right now. So
anyway. You shouldn't. Well, I mean, look, here's the thing. I made reference to the note that you put out. You are a communicator. You are a senior principal at Bracewell, a partner for the policy resolution group that's part of that practice here in Washington, D.C. Energy has always really been your expertise, but you fundamentally, to me, are someone, when I am like trying to get smart really quick about whether it's a topic I'm going to go on TV or radio to talk about relevant to energy, I always check in with what you've shared. Every week you share something, and it's what's on the podcast, what's in the news, what's happening on the Hill. It is comprehensive. It's smart. Tell me how it is you started doing that long before it was cool to do that.
Yeah, it's really a great story. It's about utility, right? I mean, look, I worked on Capitol Hill for many years. I worked for a bunch of different members. I worked on the Appropriations Committee. Information back then wasn't traded as easily as it is today, right? This is the 90s. It was after, of course, Al Gore invented the internet, but not quite before all of us had computers and email, social media, and all those things. So, so as I came in off Capitol Hill and started working in the consulting world, I was working on energy issues, right? And when I worked on energy issues, I was looking for a way to convey to a handful of reporters who were focused on my set of issues, some facts or things. And what I recognized is that a lot of these journalists were looking for information that could be used as background, that could be used for quotes, that they were just seeking information. And so I started writing like a tip sheet, and this is in 1998.
Yeah. Started
writing a tip sheet and sending it to, 50 or so reporters that I was working with on environmental issues, right? Whether it's climate change at the time or MTBE was one of the issues we were working on. So that's how it started, right? And I did it once a week just because I felt like it was easier to do it that way. And, it's just blossomed from there, right? And I started doing it, expanded issues, more issues, and I threw in some podcasts and things, or some op-ed things. And then as we got more and more social media, we included quotes and we included things to just keep freshening it up. And the reality is, for me, it was a couple things. One, it was a marketing tool, right? I used it to get stuff out that I wanted reporters to hear, right? Inside for our clients and things that they were doing. At the same time, I wrote it in my old journalism style, which was more objective, and so I didn't sound like I was pitching something the whole time.
Sure.
And then second piece is it was there to just to kind of stay in touch with reporters and put myself in their mind on a regular basis, right? And as it turns out, they started to like it. And they started to rely on it. And so it got more and more and more and more. The third piece, which is kind of a secret piece that I haven't really told anybody much, but, when I send it out weekly, I get either notes back on who's on vacation, or I get notes back as who no longer works at the Washington Post or something
You're
like that.
freshening your list.
So I'll give you an example. Last week, a couple weeks ago, I sent out the note. I got a bounce back from a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, and I called over to the Wall Street Journal and I said, "Hey, where's so and so?" Another colleague at the Wall Street Journal. I said, "Where's so and so?" He goes, "What do you mean, where's she? I just finished the story with her a couple days ago." He didn't even know she had left, right? And I had found out before he found out that she had gone to the New York Times.
No kidding.
So it's really kind of valuable for me from a client standpoint too, that I can, when I'm on a call with other clients and other consultants, they say, "Hey, yeah, let's pitch this to Matt Daly at the AP." I'm like, "Well, Matt Daly no longer is at the AP. He's just left and went over to here," right? Yeah. Which of course, Matt Daly's still at the AP, but
he is still at the AP.
But so it became a valuable updating piece too for finding where people were, and it almost became kind of like lore, right? And I would call a reporter who had switched jobs, and I say, "Hey, man, where are you?" He goes, "How did you know I left? I haven't told anybody yet," right? And so those kind of pieces made it valuable, and then as I started to do it, I just broadened it, right? I found out that clients were interested in it as well, right? Beyond just reporters. So I started putting clients on it. And then my friends in the environmental community were, who were on the other side of me a lot of times. And actually nowadays we're kind of on the same side on some issues, right?
Sure.
But they wanted on. And then academic people wanted on. And I said, I just started putting people on and adding it and adding it and adding it. And then it's just kind of taken off from there over let's say the 25 plus years that I've been doing it. And I have a list of about roughly 8,000 to 10,000 people who get this thing. And, I wanted to also figure out ways to, broaden it a little bit. So I started to put it on Substack too for free, and,
awesome.
And that puts it on LinkedIn, and that puts it on Facebook, and it puts it on X or Twitter, whatever you call it nowadays.
Yeah.
And so, so it's really kind of taken on a life of its own. It's been kind of an identity. It really was. In fact, Coral Davenport wrote a feature on me maybe 10 years ago when she was at National Journal, maybe 15 years ago. And she was talking to Bill Wicker, who was at the time the comms guy on the Senate Energy Committee for Jeff Bingaman. And Bill said to her, this is value. This is essential reading. And it was there before Politico started doing what they were doing.
That's right.
In fact, Politico stole his idea, right? Which of course they did, but then they monetized it, so good on them. So,
absolutely.
So really, it really was valuable. It's still been valuable. And you wouldn't believe it. I was at CERAWeek last week, and everybody who I ran into at CERAWeek says, "Oh, hey, I get your newsletter." And I'm like, well,
awesome.
I used to joke and say, well, at least somebody reads it, right? But I found out pretty much that a lot of people are reading it. So
it's a great
it must be doing something right. And part of it is the good work that we do with clients, and a lot of it is the good work that my colleagues do to help be resources to people, and that's another reason why it's valuable, because it gets us in people's minds. It and people reach out to us, and we can engage. So, and that's what the business is about. It's engaging.
Absolutely. You must have a team of people that help you with it, because there's so much in it.
People always ask me that, but the answer is really no.
Wow.
So I have a guy who works with me named Sam Spiegelman. He's our assistant, and he updates my lists, right? So when I see things, I send the notes to him. People say, "Hey, can you put so-and-so on the list?" I send it to him. He does all the updates. So I don't do a lot of that. But honestly, really, the secret is I just work on it all week, right? So I just sent it out today around noon. Mm-hmm. I open it. I have it on my file saved as a file before I copy it and put it in to an email. Mm. And then I just take out the parts that are no longer relevant.
Right.
And then I just update it throughout the week. When good events come, or a good op-ed comes, or I hear something that's valuable, I put a note in there. And then over the weekend, like Sunday nights, I usually work on it for a couple hours, and then I'll do a little bit of work on it on Monday morning, just to, write in the lead. Or as you know, maybe the listeners don't, I write a little personalized like lead in, which a lot of times it has stuff about sports. Sometimes
why
it
it's
has
cool though,
stuff,
Frank, because you and I are in the conversation making business. And the reason why that's so cool to me is that even today when I read it, I was caught up on some of the things that were keeping you busy. I mean, that that we've got hockey coming up, and you talked a little bit about March Madness, and you hit up the fact that it to me keeps me up to date on some of the things that are going on with you. But you and I can, as when I see you, if I see you at an event or I see you on the Hill, we immediately catch up over some real things that are really happening. And I love that so much about that piece that you share, because it is it keeps it very human too. It's very down to earth.
And you know what? That's what people say. And I think that's part of the reason why people tend to like it, because it does kind of break through that seriousness of politics and policy and legislating and all that stuff. And, we get into that. Like I talked about 301 tariffs today. That USTR is doing on the cement industry. And, we talked about the NEPA guidance and the comment period ending, and, just little blurb mentions like that, for the Senate environment hearing that is going to have nominees, right? But then mixed into that is the Frozen Four bracket. And, hey, congrats to the University of Wisconsin, who just beat Ohio State, for the women's ice hockey championships. And, this is a great story. Wisconsin and Ohio State have traded national titles for the last 5 years, and each one winning the opposite year. And so it's like an epic battle between those two universities. And I mean, I'm an ice hockey guy, as you know. I referee. In fact, I'm refereeing the congressional ice hockey game tomorrow.
I did see that in your note too.
My favorite thing probably in the last few years was putting Tom Emmer in the penalty box. So then having him remember it when I was on the Hill, when he ran.
I bet he did.
So,
Frank, walk me back, because you mentioned you were on the Hill, not to take away from putting Tom Emmer in the penalty box, because that's a story that I need to hear more about. But I want to get to sort of how it is that because you are so well sourced, you're so good about sharing that information. You were on the Hill for a while. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to be in Washington, D.C.
Well, I went to Hillsdale College. So, I'm from Michigan originally, was an ice hockey player, but I ended up when I went to college, I was a track runner. And so I chose the college that I went to based on the best scholarship offer I got, which of course, never the best thing to do. So, you should always pick the school that, fits you. It turns out that Hillsdale College back then, it's a little different today, Hillsdale College. It's a little more Heritage Foundation, politically oriented. But it turns out Hillsdale College fit me back then, and it drove me to Washington, right? Because they had a Washington program where they were very proud of. And so I got engaged there and was able to do that, which got me, entry-level jobs on Capitol Hill, which I teach at GW as an adjunct faculty, and for 14 years now I've done the public relations class there. And I tell my kids and GW, if you're going to GW, you want to be in the policy game or politics game already, right? Because you don't go to GW unless you're going there. But I say, go work on Capitol Hill, because working on Capitol Hill is like doubling your experience because of what you get thrown into, right? And that's literally what happened to me. I bounced back and forth between 5 different offices with Senator Lugar, with Congressman Bill Schuette, who then, of course, later was the Attorney General of Michigan and ran for governor of Michigan against Gretchen Whitmer and barely lost, right? Wow. 10, 15 years later. And then I worked for Toby Roth from Wisconsin for many years, which got me to be a shareholder in the Green Bay Packers, which is one of my favorite things.
You're my second guest that's a shareholder in the Packers.
Yes, no, a shareholder. And I used to hang out with the Packers because they loved Toby Roth. Because the offensive linemen were Rush Limbaugh listeners, and Toby Roth used to be on Rush Limbaugh a lot, and they loved that he was from Green Bay, and so we used to get to go out and hang out with them and go in the locker room and stuff. So that was always fun. And then I worked for Hal Rogers for the longest time, who's actually the dean of the House now. When Republicans took over in 1994, which was a crazy time. That I think I liken, I liken a lot of what's going on now in 2025 with Doge and President Trump and all the budget cut proposals and ending the Department of Energy and the Department of Education and all that stuff. That's what they were trying to do in 1995, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of historical perspective that I have that actually is one of the things where I think also people like to talk to me, because I tend to have some historical perspective, because, in Washington, people are so focused on exactly what's happening in the moment.
That's right.
And I think we lose a lot of, not a lot of new ideas happen in Washington, D.C. Things that were happening 20 years ago are still happening today. And so I think that historical perspective a lot of times is helpful to kind of bring people to reality. But anyway, so I worked there. I worked for Joe Nolenberg and then came out into the consulting world. And it was really kind of a challenge, right? There's so many things that happen on Capitol Hill for you where you learn so much, but you still don't know a lot, right?
Yes.
Like I remember going to my first job out, which was as a consultant to Chrysler, the car company.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I knew so much because I worked for Nolenberg and Rogers, right? Mm-hmm. But every one of those lobbyists in that office, they knew those two guys better than I did and more. They knew everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a real learning experience as to, how you have to grow to be a professional outside of after you leave Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And so all of that stuff has really kind of grown on me and built, and that's how I've kind of created a specialty and a career. And when you do something for 25 or 30 years, you know a lot and you have the historical perspective and you get good at it.
Yeah.
And people keep coming back to you on it. And that's one of the benefits of what I've had in my career, is just being a steady hand that, tends to know the issues, tends to have good information, and tends to have reliable sources who can get back to reporters quickly. Right.
Yes. Oh, no doubt.
And that becomes a valuable piece that they remember and that they transfer to their colleagues when they switch positions. I can't tell you,
absolutely,
Lisa, how many times I've had a new reporter call me and say, "Hey, Evan Helper said I need to talk to you. I'm new to the beat," or somebody like that. So that's fulfilling. That's that just means that you're doing a good job and just trying to be helpful to people and, do the work for our clients.
Tell me a little bit about that. You're at Bracewell now for quite a while, and you guys do spend quite a bit of your time in the energy space. And I obviously have followed your work for a long time, so I have a little bit of a sense of what the Policy Resolution Group does specifically. But talk to me a little bit about what kinds of issues you're focused on, at least now in 2025.
Yeah. So, what, look, we've been focused on energy. I've been there for 25 years. And honestly, we've been focused on energy issues often. And we do other things too, but really energy is our bread and butter.
Sure.
And, traditionally in the past, we were traditional energy, heavy utility users. And it's interesting in oil and gas. It's interesting now over the last 5 to 10 years. I'd say the latter half of the Obama administration, through the Trump administration, through the Biden administration, those sectors have collapsed together. Mm-hmm. Utilities are doing more and more renewables than you could ever imagine. Yeah. Oil and gas is a leader among clean energy technologies, whether it's geothermal, whether it's a hydrogen or industrial gases that are cleaner. So there's so much crossover now that it's hard to tell. Back in the day, we used to get painted by environmentalists as a coal advocate or something like that. And it's just not the same anymore, right? I mean, I'm working on offshore wind issues. I'm working on hydrogen issues. I'm working on energy storage issues, right? We're building the largest energy storage facility in the U.S. that's gravity-based. We have a new 2 to 4 day storage facility in Calistoga, California, that one of my clients is building because PG&E had an RFP for it. So there's a lot of stuff now where there's so much crossover. And, you see a company like Vistra, who we worked with when they were TXU. They're a big utility in Texas. They have transmission systems now. They have wind turbines and solar projects all over. They have battery facilities in places all over. So, a lot of these companies have diversified over the 20 years that I've been there. And I think what it's really done is it's created opportunities for you to build and create new innovation, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what a lot of these companies have done. And you can't really, bookend them anymore because they really are diverse and they really are, leading technology changers, right?
Sure.
When in the energy space. So
it makes a ton of sense.
It's a proud moment for, to say that you've seen it kind of emerge and collapse into what it is today. The one thing I will say is, though, I started working on offshore wind back probably when I first met you, just outside of the Bush administration and into the Obama administration. And back then I would have said, hey, I would have thought we had lots of wind turbine projects, right? And we don't have many yet. And I'm always flustered by why that never really happened. But hopefully we're getting there. Virginia's building has one half built and they're about to finish it this summer. So I think we're really seeing some progress in a lot of fronts, both from a jobs perspective, from an innovation perspective, from a meeting energy demand perspective.
Yes.
Which is a key point now in a lot of these things. And frankly, from a decarbonization perspective as well. So all of those things can be part of the same solution.
For sure.
And I think that's one of the things that's where energy innovates, right? And I really feel like I've been glad to be a part of that.
Well, you've seen a tremendous evolution over the course of the 25 years you've been at Bracewell, just from being on the opposite sides of issues to then somehow finding yourselves in similar issues, fighting for advancement. It's cool. It is really kind of you've seen it really come full circle. Right. Would you say, is there a particular issue that stands out to you as one that you're especially proud of having worked on or something? Is it the wind project that you just mentioned? Is there something else that stands out to you that's...
Well, look, I think, when in 2005, I started working on land-based wind in the mid-Atlantic, right? And that was a struggle, right, at the time. And in fact, it was interesting because many of the wind companies were skeptical of bringing a person like me in to help them.
Yeah.
Because they always thought I was, a anti-wind type of guy, right? Mm-hmm. But, there are projects now in the mid-Atlantic that I drive past with my kids that I am part of the team that finished those projects, right?
Awesome.
And so, those are proud moments. And there's stuff like that all over, right? The Ivanpah project, which is a big solar project south of Las Vegas, that was one of the projects that I worked on, and the kids thought that was the coolest thing ever, right? In fact, there's a lot of reporters who wanted to make the trip to Las Vegas to see that too. So
I bet.
So, those are the things that I think, where you see success, where you see something that is built and is contributing to both jobs, both clean energy, both decarbonization and meeting energy demands. And you have some physical stuff in the ground, right? That you were a major part of developing. I think that to me is where you really get, I enjoy it. I love seeing, it's like, you remember the movie, European Vacation with Chevy Chase when
I sure do.
He's going around the circle and he says, kids, Big Ben, Parliament, right? Every time we go past the wind turbine projects, I would point to my kids, hey, look at the wind turbine project that Dad worked on. And they're like, yeah, right, Dad, after a while, right? The first few times they thought it was cool, right?
Absolutely.
So, but that's the kind of thing that I think has been, and there's been lots of stuff like that, right? No matter what it is.
If you reflect on your career, and then we take a look at the things you do in your free time as a referee, as an umpire, as an official in some of these places, it seems to me like there is some correlation between shepherding and moving issues through the process and making sure that games and events go the way they're supposed to go. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah,
I think
like there's some synergy
there.
When I started this when I was young, right? This was a way to make money. Mm-hmm. And when I worked on Capitol Hill, and by the way, I made $1,000 a month when I started working in Senator Lugar's office.
Oh gosh!
So
thank goodness for $1 of your night.
I wasn't going to go work as a waiter or anything at like Hawk and Dove.
No.
So I was refereeing sports at the time to make a little extra cash. And honestly, what I always would tell people is the refereeing actually is a release for me. People are like, what? You go out there and get yelled at by people? Because it's total focus on what you're doing, right? And it's a stress reliever in a sense, because now I don't worry about what was going on at the congressional office, or what's going on with clients, or what's going on at the office, or what's going on at home with finances, or, your kid's school or whatever, right?
Yeah, you can really unplug and go do something.
It's a stress relief there. Plus, it helps decision-making, right? You've got to be a decision maker when you're a referee. And I think that's always been vital for, people who have to be successful in business. They have to be decision makers and be willing to make a call. And then thirdly, what the refereeing does is it just makes you a better people person, right? You really do have to manage people, manage situations, and manage stuff that relates to everything you do in the working world. Whether it's client relationships, whether it's how you deal with an issue, whether it's how it breaks on Capitol Hill or whatever. But that management is real world management that I think is valuable, a valuable add to. So all that stuff works, and all that stuff has been part of, building the professional that you are. And so I'm just glad I've been able to do it.
Tell me a little, you mentioned the congressional hockey game. Tell me a little bit about what that structure is. Is it staffers versus members? Is it for charity?
It's lobbyists versus staffers and members.
Okay.
So like, for instance, Tom Emmer, who played at the University of Alaska, or he's in Minnesota. One of them, somebody played at Alaska Fairbanks and somebody played at Minnesota. I think Stauber played at Minnesota and played interleague hockey. But there's a bunch of guys who Bausch, Quigley, Larry Buckshin from Indiana.
Okay.
There's a few others too. They always play. A couple of them have some skills. Like Emmer, he's got some skills for an older guy.
Hey,
right? But the bulk of the team is like there's a woman who was a staffer on House Energy or something like that, who played on the varsity team at Williams when she was there. And she was like probably as good a player as anyone else out there. And then after she left the Hill, she got traded to the lobbyist team. So,
I'm lucky for the lobbyists.
Right. Yeah. So, and then like my friend Tori Mazzola, who worked for, Tori, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. He played for Reed. He worked for Reed. And so he used to play for the lawmakers. And now he works for Ørsted, the offshore wind company. And now he's playing for the lobbyists on Tuesday. So I'll see him on Tuesday. And I wish he would ref, because he was a really great college ref too.
Was he really?
But he doesn't want to give up the playing part of it. So
I can't blame him.
But anyway,
you get to be out there too.
Huh?
And you get to be out there too, like in the mix.
It's fun, and that's the thing. I mean, I gave up playing a long time ago because I figured I'd get paid to be out there. Well, the congressional charity hockey game is charity, so I donate that.
Not for this meeting.
But you get paid to be out there. You're out there the entire game. You don't have to come off.
So
right?
fun.
Because you're skating the whole game. And then thirdly, you get to pick the time when you want to go, right? Instead of them telling you, instead of them telling you. So for me, that was like, hey, that's a winner. That's a win-win-win. I'm going to be reffing for the rest of my career. So I scored enough goals. So
I love it. Frank, I can't believe it. This show gets faster and faster every time, but we're to the end of our 30-minute conversation already. I have to ask you before I let you go, because it's the question I always ask is, who should I have for a future guest for the show?
Wow. I think if from a reporter perspective, I love Lisa Friedman and I love Coral Davenport, right? Because they came up through the system and they're at the top of their game.
Coral has been a guest.
Huh?
I did catch Coral before, and she is busy, but Lisa Friedman is a superstar also.
Right.
So
and they came up through when Lisa used to work on Capitol Hill for the Oakland Tribune, and then she went to E&E News and toiled as an editor and worker at a trade press, and then went to the New York Times. So they have lots of great stories, and they've been around for a long time. I would say Steve Mutson too, or Juliet Alprin from the Post. I mean, Juliet's great, and she was a reporter. She worked on Capitol Hill. She covered stuff for the Hill, and now she's climate editor at the Post. So yes. I love her. Lori Montgomery also is a big editor now. She was the business editor for a while. Lori Montgomery and I knew each other when she was the Washington stringer for the Detroit Free Press.
Wow.
Right. And
That's
so
amazing.
we worked on some crazy stories together. Like
I
there was one
believe
story
it.
where Nolenberg found a teddy bear and we returned it to the Redford school that was sending. It was like a Flat Stanley thing, right? Where they're sending it around the world. And he was going to just take it back to the school. I said, whoa, wait a minute. And I called Lori Montgomery and we ended up doing a big, huge story on it. And then we had a TV hit when we brought it back, and it was like a big,
Love it.
So, so I've got some when you stay around long enough, you meet some really great people.
Totally
and,
agree.
And they transfer with you. So, so that's great. I mean, I would love for you to have Dana on here. I think she'd be awesome from Fox News. And,
she has been a guest. Fox,
okay,
yes,
there you
Dana
go.
Perino,
You're already ahead of me. So
I've had a few.
I can't even name people. You ought to probably get Liam Donovan on here. Liam Donovan is my colleague at Bracewell. He's got about 20,000+ followers. He is a political machine. He knows so much about the politics of what's going on, and he's just a machine during the election year, and it translates to other things too.
Absolutely.
Outside of the election year, but he really is great.
I was counting on you. I was counting on you to have a long list.
Yeah,
hey,
so
Frank,
I mean, look, I can stop there. Or I can keep going, but the fact is, there's some good people out there, and there's so many smart people in Washington. I just love being here, and I love being part of it. I don't like to think that I always learn something from somebody, and I think that's really important for young professionals. They always have to learn something. I mean, look, I've been here for 35 years. I'm learning stuff all the time. So that's like kind of a lesson I leave. So,
well, it shows in everything you do. It shows in our friendship that we've had now for 20 years or more. I'm going to make sure in the show notes for today's guests that they know how to get on your list if in fact they're following Energy. Because to me, I mean, I said it at the top and I'll say it again, it really is a tremendous resource and it's a great service that you do. And it's also a ton of fun. And I hope that you'll mention this show in your note for when this airs.
Oh, for sure. In fact, I wanted to mention it before, and it's been like on my list to get on there. So I may mention it.
You can mention it next week because it's going to air.
Okay, well then I have to mention it, right? I'll have to put it in there. So I've been doing Julie Mason shows
I love
Sirius
Julie
XM.
Mason. She's been a guest on my show.
Again, she would be great, right?
Awesome.
So I'm her energy expert, and of course we know each other from her Houston Chronicle days.
Of course. Yeah.
And so I love doing her show. It's just fun. I like doing stuff like this.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad that you asked me, and I really am grateful to be on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Have a great rest of your week.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Friday Reporter. Huge thanks to you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along on social media for more updates. And as always, I'll be back next week with another fascinating guest from the world of news, media, and content creation. Until then, thanks for listening.